JavaScript is one of the fundamentally most important language for a web developer and full stack developer or a mono stack developer. It becomes the foundation for understanding and working and developing websites on the web. If you are into web development, JavaScript is a must known thing. In this session, I'm going to kick you start within 1 hour of JavaScript. We cannot cover an entire JavaScript frameworks within 1 hour or in the short tutorial. There will be many more and there needs many more for a proper justification and proper learning purpose. However, let's get started and understand JavaScript using a website called W3Schools. W3Schools is an awesome website that provides tons of resource materials. What I'm going to do is head on to W3Schools, click on Learn JavaScript, and voila. Now we have a whole list of complete detailed JavaScript course that is available. I'm going to use this website as a reference and you can use it too so that you already know what I'm talking about and I don't have to create all the nitty-gritty things with it. So we're going to use this website very quickly and cover basic concepts of JavaScript as much as we can within 1 hour. Okay, so without further ado, let's begin. But before we do that, my name is Dr. Zishan and I've been teaching JavaScripts and PHP and web development for the last 10 to 12 years. And I have a vast experience. So that's why I'm going to keep it short, simple, and to the basic point so you understand how JavaScript is working. And so if you want to learn more and get more in depth about it, don't forget to subscribe this channel. Leave your comments what exactly you want to know about this JavaScript or any other topic you want to learn from W3Schools, and I will be making more tutorials as we go along. So hit that like and subscribe button, leave your feedback, and let's begin with JavaScript. So now JavaScript is considered as one of the world's most popular language, hands down. That's a known fact. If you are into programming, if you are into web development, JavaScript is like your bread and butter. You need it to survive, otherwise, you are nowhere in the web development community. JavaScript is a programming language, though, as compared to HTML and CSS, which where we refer to them as scripting language. JavaScript is a programming language. Now, what do we exactly mean by that? In the simple terms, it's a language that allows us to control the document. It allows us to control the input. It allows us to control the output by using if else, by using creating variables, by using arithmetic operators, conditional operators, logic building. Basically, that's what we call it. So it allows us to build the logic and control how we see the output, how we read the output or input from the user. Okay, that's how basically it goes. So in a simple sense, for example, if I click on this here, it displays the media. So it's controlling what user does, and based on user's input, what I'm supposed to do. Understand? Fantastic. So this is basically what we do. So let's begin into the more introduction of JavaScript. Now, in JavaScript can change your HTML content. That's the fundamental concept. So this page basically describes us what JavaScript can do in a general sense. So the first thing we need to understand is that HTML is there, but we use JavaScript to manipulate and change the HTML content using a method called getElementById. We will be talking about this method throughout this course. So it's one of the most important methods used throughout this course. Then how we do that, basically we use something called document element by id and an HTML. Don't worry about this. This is not going to make sense. As I said, we're going to talk more about this later on, and I'm going to break everything down, what exactly this document is, what do we mean by get element by id, and what exactly is this word demo, and then what inner HTML does. So we'll talk about this. So basic thing to take away from now is that understand that JavaScript is a programming language. It allows us to control and change the content of HTML. Okay, so we write something with HTML, but we can change it. How does that change work? So for example, if I have this HTML page, I can use a button to turn the light bulb on, and I can use the button to turn the light bulb off. This is what interaction basically means using JavaScript. How does it work? So if I check on the code, there's a whole bunch of code here. Basically, we have a button, we have an image, and we have another button. So when I click on this button using a JavaScript code, I'm able to change the image that is displayed here. So now I have changed the image that is displayed here. So source image is different, and then when I turn it off, again using another button, I'm changing the image reference here. So using a JavaScript, I'm able to define how the content should be displayed or what contents needs to be displayed based on user interaction. That's what primarily JavaScript allows us to do. Okay, so this is what it is talking about. So this is what JavaScript does. So how does change work? It change works with respect to get element by id. We read this content basically using something called JavaScript button. And within JavaScript button, we provide this on click event. This is an attribute that we associate with our button. And within this button, we write this JavaScript code. Now, what we typically telling this is that, hey, there's a document here, which is this document HTML. Within this HTML, there's an element called demo. Okay. So get that element by ID called demo. So go inside this document, get me an element that has an ID called demo. And then once you find that element, dot change the style of that element, okay, and change that style using font size, this thing. So what this typically is, this is changing CSS. So using JavaScript, we not only can change the HTML content itself, we are also able to change the CSS style using the style dot font size. Okay, so don't worry, as I said, we will be talking a little bit more about this as we go along. So this is what JavaScript can do in other simple ones. We can change CSS style, then we can change and hide elements within HTML as well. So since we can change HTML, we can do whatever possibly we want. We can hide an elements in HTML, or we can show the HTML elements. So we can use the style display and display none to hide and show the display elements with that. How style attribute or CSS property works, it's a complete CSS thing. Okay, so this is what JavaScript introduction is, that JavaScript is able to control and manipulate this. How do we write JavaScript? Now let's come to the real part. Basically, how do we start working with JavaScript? We understand JavaScript can do various different things. How do we start with JavaScript? Well, we start with the script tag. Every JavaScript code needs to go inside the script tag. You write the JavaScript code inside the script documents. Do keep in mind that you can write multiple script tags as well. So if I come here, I can write another script tag and then I can close it. Okay, so as we know that the basic rules of HTML apply, that every HTML tag has angle brackets. You write a tag name and then you close a tag name. So starting tag, ending tag. This tag is a script indicating I'm writing a JavaScript, and then I write my JavaScript code here. Every single code basically goes inside this script code for a simple pure JavaScript. That's all it is. Within this script code, I can write functions, which are basically block of JavaScript code, and then can be executed and or called upon based on various different operations we want to do. Okay, so this is what we can do with in terms of that. Then JavaScript can be written inside the head or a body. So you can place any number of scripts in HTML document, just like I've mentioned. You can write the JavaScript inside your head tag or inside your body tag as many times as you want or wherever you want, as long as you provide the script tag and close the script tag. Okay, so that's the first rule of thumb that we need to understand, that hey, JavaScript can be or needs to be written using script tag. It can be written anywhere in the head or in the body. Then we say that hey, if you write it inside the body, again you write the script tag. Then external JavaScript, what do we mean by that? This basically means that you can typically use JavaScript in a separate file as well. Okay, so you can create a brand new file, an empty file, and write the JavaScript code there. What exactly is happening in the code, don't worry about it. We'll talk more about functions and how these things work later on. So we just write a function and we put it inside the JavaScript external file, and we save this file as .js. So give it any name and save it as .js. So HTML files are saved as .html. CSS files are saved as .css. We have talked about this in previous tutorials. The links in the description, you can follow and read about more about them in those tutorials. But in CSS and JavaScript are separate files. You can integrate JavaScript using external JavaScript.js file. So you write a code because you are using an external file. Now no longer you need to write the script tag. Then within your HTML, you just write the script tag and provide the source. Again, we are using script tag in your HTML. So this is my HTML. Within this, I've said, hey, there's a script, again indicating JavaScript, but this time I've written a source. Source indicates an external file. Just like an image, we provide a source tag. So this is my script tag JS, indicating my JavaScript is there, but it's in a separate file, and you can use JavaScript from there. And there's no content in between this tag. So there's nothing here, and we close the tag. Now, if I use it, my paragraph is changed because I've clicked on this button, because the code is inside this JavaScript function. Wonderful. Excellent. So this is the second way of doing it. We rewrite the script tag, we write an external JavaScript, and we can use it anywhere as we want. Okay, the external JavaScript has a couple of advantages though, so we need to understand that. The external JavaScript provides a separate cleaner code, so your entire JavaScript code can be in a separate file, and you can very simply just segregate your HTML CSS from your JavaScript. It makes HTML and JavaScript easier to read and maintain. So if you have a lot of JavaScript code, things become much easier to work around. And then cache JavaScript files can speed up the lots of things. So if you are using JavaScript, typically means the same code, you don't have to run again and again with every single HTML file. The JavaScript code can be cached, and then the code can just call up the functions from the caches, making thing a breeze and page load very quickly. That's basic thing that we need to do. Moving on, let's talk about output. So once we understand where to write the JavaScript, how do we generate the output using the JavaScript? Typically, we use four methods. One is called inner.html, second is called document.write, third is window.alert, and then console.log. Let me explain very quickly what exactly we mean by that. So if I have my document here, okay, and I need to write generate some output, any form of output. So we use something called document.getElementById by id demo. Okay, now as I said, we will talk a little bit more about this right now. So let me explain what exactly happening here. So this is document. This is typically referring that, hey, I have a web page, okay, and basically because I'm writing this code inside this HTML, so technically it's actually referring to this own HTML. So it's just referring to itself that, hey, I am a document. Within my document, dot is a connector operator. It connects this document object with this content, and then it says within this document I have an element by id called demo. So get that element. So this is actually a function. What we are doing is we are using a built-in function and we're calling this demo. So we are saying that within my HTML, within my document, I have a paragraph or any tag that has a name called demo. So I created a paragraph, id is equals to demo. So this is an HTML tag and that has an id called demo. So what I'm telling this, that there's a document. Inside this document, get element by id, get me an element that has an id called demo. Right? That's why we use an id attribute and we provided a name demo. And then what you need to do is, once you have this element, change its inner HTML. So change its inner content, whatever content it's there, you need to change it. So we use again the dot operator to connect it, and we say inner HTML is equals to 5 plus 6. Okay, so when I execute this code, we have again same script tag. Within a script tag, we provide document get element by id, change this demo to this. So if I come here, we see 11. Why 11? 5 plus 6, 11. And again, in the paragraph tag, there's nothing there. But now the document data is being fed by this method here. Okay, so this is one way of generating output. So this document is actually referring to the current web page document itself. It's an object. So we say that we are referring our own self, and then we are using a method called get element by id to read the data within my HTML using an element id. So we use this element id attribute and we give it a name. So if I change this name to, for example, demo my, okay, and if I run this code, now there's no output because it's looking for demo and there's no demo here. So if I now change it to demo my, run the code, now you see 11. So basically this is my name. I can give any particular name here and I provide the name here. Now when I click on this, it basically says change the inner HTML of this demo tag and put this output, and I can actually print anything here. So I can say brackets semicolon, I can say hello Zishan, my name, click run, and hello Zishan is printed. So technically nothing was there, but it's there. And then be mindful, I can print this in terms of HTML tag. So I've written an HTML tag here within my JavaScript. So if I run it, now the HTML tag gets executed, because when I print it, this text gets sent to the browser and browser reads this as an HTML content, and then it says, hey, there's a tag here. So the tag is applied. That's basically one way of generating our output. So that's an inner HTML using this get document element method. Okay. The second way is we use document.write. Document.write allows us to write the content on a web page directly. So if I click on try it yourself, now you see we have my first page. So my first page is there. My first page paragraph is there. Never call document.write after document has finished loading. Let me explain you what exactly we mean. Basically, when I execute this code, it will basically run this and print this. So if I write this document.write, it means that we have a document. Go inside this document. After the content has been loaded, print this statement 5 plus 6. So write works like an output string or print string, and it prints whatever is written within its parentheses on your browser page. Okay. Now what exactly we mean by here, never call document write after the document has finished loading. What this basically means that if I call this after the document has been loaded, okay, so if this page is currently loaded, it's displayed. Now if I somehow click on a button and use document.write to print the content, it will overwrite the entire content of this page. So now because I've integrated this as a script tag within my document, so this gets loaded with this page as a whole, so no problem here. Okay, so this is another way of generating an output, document.write. We will do more example with this and I will try to explain how the overriding of document works. Okay, so document means this current page. Again, this is an object. This document refers to my page. Write on this page 5 plus 6 using parentheses. This is again another function here. Okay, so let me just close these previous workarounds and go back our code. So this is the second way, using document.write. The third way is when we use button.write. Oh, okay, let me have an example. So if I come back here, let me show you this example of the warning that we talked about in this series. So in this case, we had a working that never call the document after the document finish. What exactly we mean by that? So I've loaded a document page. The document page is loaded. It's there now. Okay. And then in this case, I have written button. So button is there. Type is button. So no problem with that. This is simple HTML. On click document dot write. What this means that when I click on this button, execute this event and then document dot write. So this is executing document dot write after the page has been already displayed to the user. So now as soon as I click it, see all the contents get overridden and everything is hidden and it just displays me this kind of content. This is what exactly this warning meant, that do make sure you use document dot write as a script within the current document. It's fine. But if you use it as a on click event and after the page has been loaded, it will override your data. So we need to be a little careful about that. Then let's just use window.alert. This is a cool way of just generating in pop-up window. So now what we're doing is we are using window. Now do note that we are using document here. Document.write means write on my current web page. But at this moment, we are now using another object called window. What window does is that if I use execute it, see this, it gives me a message as a pop-up window and it says 11. So if I click OK, now it loads me my page. Window basically is an object referring to your current browser window. So if I need to do or change anything from my browser window, I will use the window object. And one of the methods within this is called alert. So it generates an alert and prints everything. So if I can use this here and I can say hello Zishan in this case, and then I run this code. So you can see this, it generates a pop-up message, click OK, and then the page reloads. So document.alert, window.alert is another way of generating an output or generating basically an alert messages. Then the third is console.log. Now console.log is basically another way programmers use to read and understand the debug errors or way the debugging works. Okay. So for example, if I in my keyboard, if I press F12 or usually we use Control Shift I, we have something called, oops, no this one. Uh, if I go back to my Google Chrome, sorry about that. So if I come here, we have what we call a developer mode. So if I go in my Chrome and if I choose file, edit, where is my developer mode? Sorry, settings, more tools, and I go in developer mode here. So now we get a developer options available. Okay, so every browser has this. So usually it's Control Shift I or Command Shift I, depends on what window operating you're using. In this case, we have options and Shift I. Okay, so options key I on my Mac, and if I use this, minimize it. So this opens a console window, which is a debugger window present in almost every single browser. Okay, within this we have a tab called console. So if I come inside the console, this is exactly where my console is. So now if I run the code, it runs the code and it gives me an 11 error. This is a error that is generated on the console, typically not on the web page. So console.log is used to generate output on your consoles, most commonly for the browser, for the developers who are working on it. Okay, so I can use, for example, console.log. For example, again I can say hello Zishan, my name, close this and oopsie daisy do, hit run. So I get to the printer. Remember, I can use console as directly as well. So I can say 5 plus 6 here and it will generate the error for me. So I can say hello and it will generate uncaught reference. You say, hey, what are you trying to do? It doesn't mix, but it processes arithmetic operations. So if I need to generate output, for example, I can say hello Zishan in inverted quotations. It will print that as it is because now it is using this as a string. Okay, so because you are using inverted quotations, it's processing this as a string, just like I process the string here. Okay, but if I just use it directly, it will say, hey, you're trying to process some instructions. I don't know what that instruction is. Okay, so these are typically 4 ways to process this: inner.html, document.write, window.alert, and console.log. Most commonly, to print the output on the screens, we use inner.html and change the HTML content. And to generate pop-up, we use windows.alert. For a debugging purpose, as a developer, we use console.log to see where we are getting any error, any specific with that. Okay, so once you go through all these 4 basics, this is what we need to do. So moving on further, let's now talk more about JavaScript statements. How to formulate JavaScript statements. Well, a computer program, in a general computer program, is basically a list of instructions to be executed by a computer. So do mind that every computer program, every software basically you build, you use a programming language. How do we define it? It's basically an instructions. It's a set of instructions that we perform, or that performs a specific task that we use to perform as for a particular purpose. Okay, so when we have computer program, we basically mean, hey, listen, this is a computer program or a computer software, or a source code is basically set of instructions. In programming language, these programming instructions are called statements. So in terms of programming language, now when I talk about a programming language, and as a programmer, as a developer, I call them statements. Okay, so be mindful of these nomenclature. A JavaScript program is a list of programming statements. But this means that whenever I say we are writing a JavaScript programs, basically we are writing list of statements, which are again simple instructions. Okay, so in this case, we have let x, y, z. This is a statement one. Then we say x is equals to 5. So particular instruction, we are assigning a value of 5 to a variable called x. We talk more about variables later on. But this is what we call a statement 2. This becomes a statement 3, statement 4. So everything we write within JavaScript becomes a statement. Up till now, we have written document.get element by id. This is a single statement. We have written, for example, let abc. This is a statement. Abc is statement. So whatever in JavaScript you write has to be written as a statement, and every statement must end with a semicolon. That is why we use a semicolon here. Okay, so do be mindful of that. This is a standard programming language nomenclature that you tend to use, or you need to use what we call semicolons to end our every single statement. Okay, JavaScript can also ignores white spaces at a certain point. Be mindful of that as well. So if you're using JavaScript, it will ignore certain white spaces. So for example, let person is equal to hygiene, or let person is equal to hygiene are same. We have space here, we have space here, and those spaces here, but these are both same statements. However, if you put space in the between here, then there's a problem. It will consider, if you put a space between this word, it will create a problem. But then since let is one statement in JavaScript and there's a one single space, you can enter 2 3 spaces. That should not be a problem. Okay, so these are what we call statements are. Let's on move further. Let's talk more about typical syntax. So JavaScript syntax is basically the set of rules how JavaScript programs are constructed. So syntax basically means the rules, how you write each statement within each particular programming language. So when we talk about JavaScript syntax, this basically means that what exactly you are trying to write within our JavaScript. And then you have to follow that specific rule. So a syntax is just a simple word we use in programming that allows us to understand how we are using this particular word. So in this case, we are using variable x. So this is a syntax. We say let y. This is a syntax. We used what we call in previously console.log. This is a specific syntax. You have to use console with a small c dot log. This is a syntax. If I try another example, window.alert. This again is a statement written with a particular syntax, means a set of rule, a way of writing a language or way of writing code. Okay. So a syntax is typically how we write a code. Okay, so when I say window.alert, this is a statement, a programming statement that is written as an instruction. It performs certain task, and the way the language has been written means the syntax of it has a specific signature, has a specific style. For example, we say window with the small letters, then there's a dot without any spacing, and then alert, another function again in small letters, then bracket start, inverted quotations, and then we write a string, bracket close, and then semicolon. This entire structure is basically the syntax of window.alert. Okay, and you cannot change that syntax. It has to be exactly said. So this is what basically a syntax means. So when we learn programming, when we learn coding in Java or JavaScript or Python or any other language you work with, you always need to understand the syntax, how the syntax for each language is working. The basic logic usually is same. So variables and data and arithmetic and events is same, but the syntax is quite important to understand how the syntax of that language is working, and then you can very easily follow that. Understand? So for example, we have something called JavaScript syntax, defines two types of values. Okay, so in this case we say it has a fixed value or it has a variable values. The fixed values are called literals and the variable values are called, well, variables. So what are JavaScript literals? The syntax says that if you give a direct number, this is a literal, this is a string literal, and then variable is this, let x is equals let the 6. Okay, what this means that we have created a variable called x and we have assigned it a value called 6. So variable typically is called variables, meaning that values or something whose values can be changed. If it's fixed, it's a literal. It's a literal. 10.2 is a fixed value. 1000 string name, this is a fixed value. You cannot change it. So this is a very fixed value. Variables is something where we change the variables. Okay, so when we change the variables, when we change the value, they become variables. In JavaScript, uses keywords like var, let, and constant to declare these variables. So you would see these variables a lot. We will be talking about these variables a little bit more in the variables let and constant sections, and you will find them about more appropriately where they are. But basically meaning that we have created a container. So variables are like a simple container. They hold a value. So that's why we use them var, let, and constant. The difference I will explain later. So what this basically means that this is a container that holds a value. Because this is a container, the value can be changed. Okay, as long as the container is there, as long as the container has not been deleted or destroyed, you can very easily use it. Then the syntax says we use something called operators. Again, another keyword. So operators are like same as mathematics, plus, minus, multiply, divide. We have been using this for a long time. So every time you use an plus, minus, multiply, divide, basically within Java we call them operators. Then expression. Hey, what do we mean by expression? Well, if you're coming from mathematics, if you have any basic understanding of mathematics, JavaScript expressions are basically 5 multiplied by 10 means a simple mathematical expression. So whenever we write some operation that performs certain specific task, it becomes a expression. So 5 multiplied by 10 and a statement that performs a task, a statement that performs a task. So take a value of x, whatever is stored in x, multiplied with 10, this becomes an expression. We take one string, we join it with another string, and then we add it with another string. So this is again a statement that performs joining of multiple strings using plus operator. This becomes a what we call expressions. Okay, so these are some basic concepts of JavaScript that are essential to understand. Following this, next we have something called JavaScript keywords. What do we mean by keywords? Well, JavaScript keywords are used to identify actions to be performed. These are specific words that are used within JavaScript that have a certain meaning, that have a certain purpose, and they are reserved words. Means JavaScript has invented those and they said, okay, you cannot use them for your own. These are my specific words and they perform specific function. For example, let. The let keyword tells the browser to create a variable. Similarly, a var is a keyword within JavaScript that performs a specific task. It tells the browser to create a variables, okay, with let meaning and var meaning. Similarly, we have if, else, loops, for, and so many other variables, specific keywords, sorry, that you can use within JavaScript. Okay. Similarly, let's come to JavaScript comments. Now, comments are something we will again talk immediately next section. But what this basically means that more of the time we would be required that certain codes do not execute, or we need to write some instructions around the code. So we use something called comments using the double brackets or backslash, double backslash or backslash static and static backslash. These are treated as comments. Anything you write here becomes a comment, and the browser and the interpreter and compiler completely ignores it. So in this case, I have said let x is equals to 5 and then double backslash, I will be executed. This will basically mean that this line of code will not be run and executed by the code, only this line will be executed. Whereas if I write backslash x is equal to 6, now because there's a backslash in front of this line will not be executed. Okay, only this line will be executed, and this code itself will be ignored by the browser because we have used what we call uh, backslash as an comment. Okay, so this is one other basics of JavaScript that we need to follow. Next, we need to talk about something called JavaScript identifiers. Identifier are JavaScript names. Identifier are basically used to name variables and keywords and functions. So in this case, we meaning that, for example, if I create a variable name called last name, this becomes my identifier. Okay, and if I say variable last name, variable x, the variable y, these are what we refer to as identifiers. The basic rule is that when you use these names, they must be alphabet. Capital, small, doesn't really matter, but yes, case sensitivity is there. So if you write something with capital X, is different from small x. In this case, if I use a last name with small letters, is a different as compared to n with a capital name. So these becomes two different variables. So case sensitivity issue is there. You can use a dollar sign or underscore as well. Only these two symbols typically are approved and allowed within it. Okay, so we have that basic option available, that you can use a dollar and underscore, and then you can use case sensitivity. Okay, so these are some of the basic rules and basic concepts of JavaScript that we need to follow and understand. So if you have understood it, excellent. Let's talk more about comments. So moving forward, let's talk about JavaScript comments. In JavaScript comments basically are again comments that we use with a double backslash. So every time you want to comment out something, by commenting means something that is not read by the browser or not executed by the browser. In fact, that's the correct way to say it, that JavaScript comments basically allow you us to prevent execution. So anything you write as a comment with these double backslash will not be executed by the browser. So this is double backslash change heading. So this is just a string. So usually we write comments for just simple understanding, some coding documentation, writing the notes within our code, letting the system know what we are trying to do. Okay, and it's an absolutely important thing. Every good programmer requires that you have comments. Every developer, every team requires you to do document within your code. So writing comments is quite essential. So it's a very simple thing, basic thing. Whenever we use the double backslash, this line of code does not get executed. Java only reads this. JavaScript only executes this using the browser, and this line again goes as a simple comment. So it's just something we write to understand what we are trying to do here. That's it. That's what basically comments are. You can use something called a multi-line comments, where multi-line comments means if you have to do a multiple lines of comments and multiple text or multiple code that you just want to hide temporarily, basically we use this multi-line comments. And for that we use backslash steric and then steric backslash. So this basically is a special signature that allows us to comment out every single thing within our code. Okay, so these are basically simple comments. Now moving forward, let's talk more about JavaScript variables. What exactly are variables? Well, you can consider variables as a containers. They are basically used to store the data. That's what basically variables are. So we have a direct values, which are literals. Remember we talked about this previously. So these are literals, but sometimes it's easier to process and work with these literals if we hold them in a container. That way we can change it, modify it, update, and do various different operations on them very easily. So that's why we tend to use containers. And by the way, every single programming language in the world, typically every single programming language in the world will have some form of containers, or as they call them, variables. So this is a common word. So if you're coming from any other language, it's the same thing. Or if you're will be continuing to any other language, containers or variables basically meaning the same concept. In JavaScript, typically we use three different ways. First is automatic. We don't use anything and JavaScript automatically assigns the variable type. Then we have something called var, let, and constant. Let's discuss each one individually. So if I automatic, meaning that if I have this and I don't provide anything prefix, I just use x is equal to 5. This is an automatic, what we call variable declaration. So we use a script tag. We said x plus x is equals to 5, y is equals to 6, and z is equals to x plus y. So what we have done is we have taken a variable x, assigned it a value 5, taken a variable y, assigned it a variable 6. Then we added these two variables together. So add the value of x, whatever is stored in x, add it with y value. So whatever is stored in y, the both values will be added. So technically we are adding whatever is inside the container. So this container is just a reference point referring to these two values, and then whatever the answer comes, we are storing it in a third variable called z. Then we can use document dot get element by id. Again, remember this means that this is our web document. Inside this document there's element by id named demo. So there's an element named id, okay, element with an id name called demo. And then what you need to do is you need to change this inner html to the value of z is plus x. So we are changing the xml internal value of this html. So when we execute it, we get the answer here. The value of z is this. So this line comes from JavaScript. Okay, this is typically a variable is. Then we use something called a var. Okay, so when we use var, basically we provide var as a prefix. And now from example you can guess that this is what it does. So what prefix does is that var is basically what we refer to as a reserve word, keyword. It lets JavaScript know that you are creating a variable. Okay, whether it's integer, byte, character, short, float, long, it doesn't really matter. Okay, var will basically create a variable in JavaScript that will allow us to save these variables, save this value as a variable. Similarly, let and constant are again two variables, which here it says that they are keywords, meaning that you cannot use var itself as a variable name. So this is a variable name, variable name, variable name. This means basically, hey, this is a var, this is a variable, x is equals to 5. Okay, so we can use var, we can use let, we can use constant. The difference between them is that a constant, if you use as a keyword, this will make your variable constant. You cannot later on change it. So for example, if I have constant x is equals to 5, now I cannot change the value of x. It will give me an error. It will say, hey, this is a constant, you cannot say x is equal to something else. So for example, if I say x is equals to now 10, this will say, no, this is, you cannot do that. Hey, this is a constant, x value is constant, means this value cannot change anymore. So if you change its value, it will complain. Okay, that's what constant is. So a let variable basically is used to declare a variable. However, there's a key difference. When we say we declare a variable with a let prefix, we have a block scope. Okay, by block scope means that variable declared inside a block cannot be accessed outside the block, whereas a variable declared as a var can be used outside of a block. So if you declare a block, now what exactly is a block? We use blocks typically within everywhere, and technically, if you understand it, we use it within functions. So if we talk about functions later on in the next sessions, we will be talking more about functions here. So we will be using these blocks. So each function has a block. When we say block, it basically means, hey, this block cannot be used as a this variable, sorry, cannot be used outside the block. Okay, or so if you declare it as a let, you cannot use it. If you declare it as a var, you can use it, because var basically becomes like a public variable and you can use it outside of the block as well. That's the key difference. So let will create a variable, however the scope is limited only within the block. So if you have a if block, if you have a else block, if you have a constant blocks, if you have function blocks, if you declare a variable inside them using let, they can only be used inside let. This is a standard typical behavior. So if you're coming from Java or Python, this is a typical behavior. But in this case, this variable becomes global, meaning you can use it outside of the block. That's the key difference between it. Okay, so a variable defined with let cannot be redeclared. So you cannot accidentally redeclare a variable using the variable let. So if you declare a variable as let and set it to a string John Doe, now you cannot do this again. So you cannot redeclare it x is equals to 10. This will create a problem. They said, hey, I already have a variable, it's already a string type, it already has a value. You cannot do that. You cannot redeclare it. Again, by redeclaring means I've used let is equals to let x is equals to 10. Okay, whereas if you declare it as a var, you can do that. So that's the second major difference we said between var and let. Okay, so if you set it var as equals to x is equal to John Doe, later on you can redeclare x is equals to 0 as well. So that's why sometimes nowadays programmers do prefer more stricter rules, so to understand exactly what's happening and to ensure certain standard programming rules, if you understand that. Okay, so in this other case, we say that redeclaring a variable using var keyword can impose a problem. So if you use this, if you redeclare it, there can be several problems within the code as well. So for example, here var x is equals to 10, here the x value is 10. Then in a block, it could be if block, it could be a function, or it could be any other thing within your code, and you declare var x is equals to 2. And so x becomes 2. So now later on, if you want to process x, which value should it hold? Okay, so obviously it will hold 2 because the latest update was this. But you maybe you just want to use this previous value. This is the problem that occurs. So we need to be careful with that. Similarly, if you go to constants, well, constant as we declared are basically variable prefix that cannot be redeclared, cannot be reassigned, and have a block scope. Again, that basically means that if you declare a variable with pi, now you cannot change its value. So if I declare pi is equal to 3.5 now, changing its original value, this will give me an error. If I say pi plus 10 and assign it again to pi, this will again be clear. So we use constant and we ensure that the variable use that are there must be assigned a value and then have been declared. So every time you use a constant, you need to provide it a value and you cannot no longer change it. So that's the major difference with what we call constant. Okay, so when to use JavaScript constants, always declare a variable with constant. When you want to know the value, you should not be changed. So if you know that a variable values should not be changed, it has to be constant, fixed, no matter what, this variable value may not change, like pi for example, right? Use constant. Okay, so that way we can be very strict with it. Then let's talk more about arithmetic operators. Now JavaScript arithmetic operators are quite simple. They are again plus, minus, multiply, divide, and then we have something called comparison operators. How do they work? Let's try it out. So we have here code. Now we created a script tag and the script tag is closed. So we assign a value of let x is equals to 5. Then we say let y is equals to 2, and then let x plus y assigned to a variable value z. So simple JavaScript code, create a one variable, create a second variable, and then we add these two variables value and assign it to a z. Now display z values. So we say document.getElement by id demo. So go to the document, find an id called demo, and change its inner HTML. The value of sum of x plus y, the value of sum of x plus y, this becomes a string, is equals to z, we assign it a value. So this becomes a very simple value. Now, here are the arithmetic operators that we have used here. Plus. So plus will use a plus operator. So if we use minus, we can use a minus sign. So this now it will assign us the minus value. Then if we use divide, this will use a divide sign. Okay, so 2.5, and then we can use a multiplication as well. So this will basically mean that if we use multiply, we get a multiplication value. So basically we have a variables, and again we can do this directly here as well. So we can come here and we can say, hey, x, for example, 5 multiply by 10. Okay, oops, 10, and then we run this code and we get 50 values. Okay, so arithmetic operations are basically what we say that we have a value that when we want to perform arithmetic operations on them, we use these operators, x plus y plus z. Okay, so we have addition, multiplication, division. You can perform all basic arithmetic operations on that. Then we have various different operators as well. In terms of talking, we have arithmetic operators, we just talked about this. We also have something called assignment operators in JavaScript. We have a comparison operators in JavaScript. We have string operators, logical operators, bitwise operators. These are all various different operators that we can perform it. So very quickly, if you go through it, we have arithmetic operators. In other words, you can perform arithmetic operations in any standard way, in any mathematical standard way as you can. So for example, we have 10 plus 50. So we perform plus, and then we assign it a multiplication as well. So now what we're doing here is we say, hey, let a is equals to 3, let x is equals to this particular value. So this is a simple arithmetic expression where we use 10 plus 500, and then we multiply it with a value. Okay, and so we can use addition, subtraction, multiplication. For exponential notation, we use a double asterisk. For division, we use a backslash. For module, we use a percentage sign. Then we have increment and decrement operators. Okay, these are all various different arithmetic operators. Let's talk more about what we call these arithmetic operators in detail. So these arithmetic operators, again, we have already talked about them. So these plus, minus, multiply, divide are there. Subtraction, multiplication, division, reminders. And then we have increment operator. This is something that I want to talk more about. What increment operator does is that it adds up our plus 1 to our current value. So increment operators are quite fun and quite important throughout the programming. So what this basically means that for example, I can say, let me write this code just like this. So I can say, hey, I can have a button. So if I zoom into it, so I can say, let me just create a button tag, BU2 button, and I can have on click event on it. Okay, is equals to, and then close this, and then I can say BU2 button. Okay, and then I can say COUNTR counter. Okay, and then if I run this code, now we have a button counter here, but currently nothing happens. So we can say, okay, once we have a button, and then we can come here and we can say h1 and then backslash h1. So let's just create a heading. Okay, and then we can give it an id is equals to bracket start bracket close, and we can say COUNTR counter. So now what we have done is we have created a heading 1 with a counter. Okay, and then again this paragraph is just for the next line. So now idea is every time I click on it, the counter should count certain value. So what I do is I come here and I create a function called functn function. Oops, I can simply say here is that COUNTR count. Okay, simple as that. So every time I click on a button, this function gets executed. Now where is this function? So we can come here in the HTML and we have a head tag. It's not necessary we can write anywhere, but as we have been talking about it, let's explore it more. So we say, okay, here's a script tag. Okay, and backslash script script tag. Within this, let me create a function called, yes, counter. So we create a counter function. Okay, bracket start bracket close, and we say functn function. It's a counter. What this function is supposed to do is it's going to create this thing. We're going to say, hey, there is a variable count count is equals to starts from 0. Every time we come here, and this function is called udo plus plus 1. Okay, so what this basically means, take the current value of count, whatever is the current value, add 1 to it and assign it back to the counter. This technically is equivalent to this thing. So we say, hey, take a variable count, is equals to count plus 1. Okay, so what this basically means, whatever is the current value of count plus add 1 into it and assign whatever the answer is back to the count. Okay, so this is increment 1, so adding current 1 to current value of count. So this is, in other words, a short form. So short way of writing this whole line. So we can write this whole line or we can write this line, technically means exact same thing. And so what we have done is we declared a variable outside a function. Function is basically a code or block of code that gets executed every time we hit this function. So if I run this code, so every time I press the counter button, I get this counter. Now this is what JavaScript allows us to do. What we are doing here simply is we created a button, we created a function counter, and then we asked it, hey, every time I click on this button, on click event is there, that every time I click on this button, execute this function. So this, what is this function? This is a JavaScript function we created here. In this function, we told it that, hey, listen, there's a count variable. It starts with a 0, but every time this function gets executed, increments its value by 1, and then print that value on the inner HTML of a element that has a counter ID. Okay, and so now whenever I click on it, we get this counter ID. Okay, fantastic, brilliant, excellent. So now this gets executed, and this is what basically our code allows us to do. Okay, so we were arithmetic operators and we were talking about that. So now let's talk about JavaScript assignment operator. What exactly we mean by JavaScript assignment operator? Assignment operators are, as by default, is equal to. Okay, this basically means assignment operator, where we assign a value of one variable onto another. So this basically means that assign the value of y on x, exactly as that. Okay, then we have a plus equals to operator. What this basically means, this is another operator that is called increment operator. This is a shorthand increment operator that's equivalent to this thing. So it says x is equals to x plus y. So what this basically means, that take the value of x, add it with y, whatever is the answer, assign it back to x. This is a typical thing. But in JavaScript, we can use this operator, shorthand operator, to do the same. So x plus is equals to y. So this basically means take the value of x, add it with y, and assign it back to x. Similarly, we have minus equal to, multiply equal to, divide equal to, mod equal to, and double percent or double equal to. Okay, in terms of exponential notations. So these are various different operators that we use in our JavaScript. Then we have something called shift operators, where we shift the bit y, and then we have a bitwise operators. Okay, these are what we call and, nor and not operators. We have a logical operators as well. They basically work with respect to and, or, and what we call and not equal to. Okay, so we have and operator, or equal to. These logical operators are basically a standard ES 2020 values. So let's explore them a little bit more in detail so we understand exactly how they're working. So equal to operator, as you know, is a very simple assignment operator. This is a simple assignment operator, assigns the value to a variable. So whenever we have used 10 is equals to x, this basically means that assign the value of 10 to the variable x. Or we can say y plus 10 means add the value of 10 to the y and assign it to the value x. So assignment operator, single equal to, assign the value. Then let's talk more about plus equals to operator. This is an additional assignment operator, adds the value to a variable. By that we mean take the value of x, if for example 10, then x plus 5 means again take the value of x, add it with 5 and assign it back to x. Okay, we can use it with a string as well. So if we use let text is equals to hello, and then we can say text plus world. So this basically means take the value of a world, add it with hello, and then assign it back to the text. So if I check this output out, this is going to print hello world for us. So what this basically means, that take the value of text, which is hello, add it with the world and assign it back to the text, and then when we print the value of text with inner HTML, changing the HTML content, we get to see hello world. As simple as that. Beautifully done. Then minus equal to operator, again equivalent to plus. Minus does the same thing. Take the value of x, subtract it from the 5, and then add it back to the x value. Similarly, multiplication operator again does the same thing. Multiply the value of x with the value of 5 and assign it back to the x. And then what we call exponential assignment operator raises a variables to the power of operand. So this basically means take the value of 10 and raise it to the power of 5, assign it back to the x. Divide operator again does the same thing. Modulus operator, or in other words remainder operator, assigns the remainder of a variable back to the x. So take x divided by 5, assign the remainder back to x. Then we have what we call the left shift assignment operator. This left shift assignment operator is basically uses the left shift variable. Then we have right shift assignment operator. Right shifts a variable signed value, so as right shifts a value sign. Then a right shift unsigned right shift operator that is there. These are all other different operators. So moreover, we will explore them in more detail in later sessions. But because this is a quick 1 hour session, so we don't need, let me just skip this and come to the data types. Okay, so now what exactly are data types? Well, very simply speaking, data types are basically the type of data we are using in JavaScript. Typically, we have not discussed this in previous examples. Let me discuss them a little bit more in detail. Basically, there are 8 data types in our JavaScript: string, number, big integer, boolean, undefined, null, symbol, and object. The object data types are object, array, and date. We'll talk more about object data types in the next session. What exactly we mean by these data types is that, for example, we have used a variable called 16. What is the type of data we have used here? We all know it's a number, but what exactly type of data it is? Then at the same time, we have 7.5. Are they two same data? In our case, yes, numbers, but in terms of computers, these two are two different types of data. This is called an integer data. This is called a float data, a decimal value. So we have what we call a string data and a decimal value data. Similarly, a number data, sorry, decimal value data. Then we have a string data variable here as well. So let color is equals to yellow. What this basically means that we have created a string data types. Then we have a boolean data types. Boolean means basically true or false. So in this case, the variable contains either value true or a value false. That's it. So these are basically what we call two standard data types available. Then we have object, where we create object type in which our data contains certain object notations. Now object means it's a representation of a class that holds value. So in this case, we have a first name, last name. They are two values are represented as a brackets and then assigned to a person. So now this person is what we refer to as an object, meaning it contains its name, it contains last name, it can contain age, surname, and multiple data. So when we have multiple different types of data assigned to a single variable in a specific manner, it becomes an object. Then we can create an array. Array is basically what we call collection of data. So in this case, we have a collection of data. So we created a cars, we use a square brackets, we say data 1, comma data 2, comma data 3. So this becomes our arrays. We have date object as well. So this object is date because it contains the various format of date using a new keyword. Okay, more about objects in later sessions. So this becomes a standard data type. So whenever we are using various different data, we have to know that okay, we are using string, we are using a decimal value, we are using an integer, or true or false. Technically, we don't need to specify. JavaScript handles these automatically. Okay, so whenever we are using them, JavaScript uses them automatically. We don't have to worry about them. We just use the data, but we have to note the type of it. Okay, so this is what we refer to as a standard data types. Then let's discuss functions in JavaScript. Now, what exactly are functions? Well, functions, we talked a little bit about functions in our previous variables and arithmetic operators session. Let me discuss function a little bit more. Basically, function is a block of code designed to perform a particular task. That's it. That's the whole gist of a function. So whenever we using functions, basically it means that we are creating a function that is supposed to perform a specific task. So a JavaScript function is executed when something is invoked or when we call it, as we call it. So let's explore the function syntax. So in this case, we have what we call a function. We create a function by using a keyword called function. We define its type being my function, which is the name. Then we say parameter 1, parameter 2. These are arguments, and then it performs a certain task. Okay, this is how it works. So typical syntax of a function works in this manner. We have a function name as a keyword. Then we provide the name of a function. This can be any standard name following a standard names convention, meaning that it cannot start with a number, it should not have a white space, blah 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 things. Then we provide parameter 1, parameter 2, or as many parameters as you want, or it may not have any parameter at all. And then we want a specific block of code to be executed. This basically means that now I can use this name to call this function, and if there are 10 instructions, all 10 will be executed. If there are 20 statements, all 20 will be executed. So function typically is basically a block of code that performs a specific tasks. Okay, so function invocation, how do we invoke these functions, or in other words, how we call this function? So we say we are going to call this function or invoking this function. Typically we say when an event occurs. So we can, again, it's not, or will depend on us. So we can say that a function can be called whenever an event occurs, or when a user clicks on a mouse button, for example, or when a certain action is performed on your web page, or specifically we use a Java code to invoke that functions. Okay, or it can automatically invoke as well, depending on how we write the code as well. And function has something called a return value. It may or it may not. It's not necessary though. Be careful of that. But return is something that is usually associated with function syntax. So that's why we always try to explain it with the function syntax. This basically means that the function was invoked from a statement. JavaScript will return to execute the code after the invoking statement. In other words, very simply speaking, we have created a function. We have said, hey, this is my function. It contains a and b, two variables or two parameters. These parameters, when passed, will be multiplied, and then whatever is the answer will be returned. Okay, so you can think of this as a basically like a parcel. So you send somebody that, hey, go to and multiply these two values and then tell me the answer. So when you expect an answer from a piece of code, that is what we call a return value is. So how do we call it? We call it using this thing called my function anywhere in MOS. So here we have said, hey, my function 4 by 3, we have given it two arguments because my function requires me to provide two arguments. Okay, so we say, hey, here's my function. It takes two arguments, and then whatever these arguments have been passed here, multiply them and then return them. So this will return the answer to this. So when I return an answer, assign that answer back to the value of x. So if I execute this code, see, this answer is 12. That's because we have written it in such a way. So we say, hey, let x be, for example, my function. Now here what we are doing is we are trying to call the function. So if I zoom in a little bit to read the code better, so we are saying, hey, there's a function called function. Its name is my function. It takes two arguments. Whatever the value of these arguments are, multiply them and then return the answer. So this basically is my function of code. So this becomes a block of code that performs a specific task. The task is that there will be two arguments, multiply them and return the answer. So now I can call this function any number of times or multiple times as we want. Then what we do is we use the same thing here. So we say my function, we call this function. This is function calling. We say call this function and pass it these two values. So when this function values is passed and then this function gets executed, it will multiply these two values and return an answer. So when it returns an answer, we need to receive that answer as well. So we have received an answer and printed in X. Remember, we did a task called button somewhere here called a counter as well. So if I come here, we have this counter application. Okay, so we can revamp this counter application in a better way. So for example, if I create another button here and I can say BUTTUN button, let me zoom in so we can read the code, and I can say, hey, there's a button and I want an on click event on it is equals to double brackets, close it, oops, close it, and then I can say reset. Okay, and then backslash BUTTUN button. What now I've done is I've created another button called reset. So when I execute this code, I have a button called reset. So when I press it, it should reset the value. Let's hide this thing because I'm not going to use any of this code. And yep. Okay, so let's just let's just say JavaScript counter counter, and then again I'm going to delete this line as well. And then now if I run it, it becomes more simplified. JavaScript counter, we have a counter app. If I click on it, 5 6, but if I click on it, reset, nothing happens. That's because we have created an on. Again, let's just make sure click spelling is correct. On click, we have created a button. Now what we want, inside the script tag, I come here and I create another function called reset. Okay, so this becomes my function. I block start, block close. So every function needs to have a block of code. The purpose of this function is up to us. So in our case, I want to reset this value back to 0. So I will say count is equals to 0, semicolon. Again, important. So I say whatever is the value of count, just reset it back to 0. That's it. Once we do that, okay, now I want that change the value on this variable and this parameter here as well. So I'm going to say document, okay, document, document, get element by id, okay, and the id is going to be what we call counter, okay, because we have this h1 id counter. So we just need to reset it, and then so we're going to say inner html is equals to count. Okay, that's it. So because we have already reset the value to 0, this will print the 0 here, and then once I recounter it, it should start from 0 because we have already changed its value. Remember, we have set it to var. Var means that variable can be used inside this, variable can be used inside this. If I set it to let, then that would be a different scenario. So if I run the code and if I hit counter 1 2 3 4, but if I hit a reset, nothing happens. Why does not it changes? That's because if I come on click, I have not provided or call that function. So every time you write a function, it's there, but it will not get executed until you call the function. So on inside the on click event, I will say, hey, call this reset function that I've created. So this is my JavaScript function name. I've called here on click. So every time a button is clicked, this function will be called. That's the true purpose of function. So every time you click on it, this piece of code gets executed again and again. So now if I re-execute this code, come back here, counter, 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 and if I hit a reset, see, it goes back to 0. Next time I increase, again starts from 1, and if I reset, it's 0 0 down. So that's the true purpose of what we call function and how the function basically works.